Welcome to Redemption Hill Church's Wednesday podcast, addressing current topics practically through a gospel-centered lens and identity. I'm Brandon Mercer, this is Charles Fernandez, and I'm with Matt Mears. We are elders here at Redemption Hill Church. A couple of quick announcements before we jump into our topic for today, which is Easter. And in saying that, I want to remind you that this Sunday is Easter Sunday. And we hope that you are very excited about all that God is going to do in your life, in the life of your family and friends this Easter. So we hope that you will join us Easter Sunday, 9:45 a.m. on Facebook Live. Invite everyone that you know. God is going to move in powerful ways. I know this Easter is going to look different than any Easter you have probably experienced before, but God will use it, and we want to invite you to be a part of that. In addition to that, our Redemption Hill Kids program is going to be actually putting on a Facebook Live event during our service. And so if you have children and you're watching our Sunday morning service at 9:45, you can also go onto the Redemption Hill Kids Facebook page, and there will be a live party there for your kids to participate in with programming with Redemption Hill Church. And so we would encourage you to do that. We're really excited about that. And the children's ministry and the volunteers of the children's ministry are going to actually be egging your house this week. And if you're a member of our church and you have children, and what I mean by that is they're going to be going to your house and putting Easter eggs in your yard for you. They'll knock on the door, leave you a note. They'll step far enough back. Believe me, we'll keep our social distance. But we just want to do something nice for the kids, give them an opportunity to do an Easter egg hunt that we know they're probably not going to be able to do elsewhere. So that'll be really fun. We're really excited about that. And finally, we want to encourage you to keep up with the daily devotions. We just finished walking through the book of Philippians. This week is Holy Week, is Passion Week, and so we're walking through the last days of Jesus' life on earth. And so we're going through Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. What did Jesus do on that day, leading all the way up to Easter, where we get to gather together and celebrate our resurrected Savior and King. And so we are excited about that. Hope you tune into those devotions as well. Okay, Easter. I love Easter. I love Easter Sunday. I love everything that goes around the time of Easter. It is typically the biggest celebration on planet Earth every year. Over 2 billion people gathering together all around the world to worship Jesus for rising from the grave. But this year is going to look a little bit different for everybody. And I think it's important, though, even in the midst of all of that, for us not to lose sight of that excitement, for us not to lose sight of what Easter actually is, because Easter is not canceled.
That's right.
Some of the things that we do during the Easter time, we might not be able to do in the same way, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But the idea of Easter, the truth of Easter, the reality of Easter, the impact on our life that Easter has is still in effect. And nothing can take that away. And so we want to realize that though we might be celebrating differently, we can still celebrate the truth and it can still have the same impact on our lives. But I know that because we're not going to be able to do some of the typical things this year that we do during the time of Easter, there's some frustration with that.
Yep.
There's some heartache that we're not going to be able to get together with families and take pictures and get dressed up and have lunches. And a lot of our family members have expressed that. What does Easter look like for us this year? And so we want to talk about Easter in general. What is Easter? Why do we celebrate it? Why is it beautiful regardless of getting together with family or getting to gather together with the family of God? And we want to get really, really practical. What does it look like this year? What are some things that we can do to celebrate it in a really beautiful way? And so that's what we're going to do. But before we discuss those things, I want us just to read the Easter story. And so, Matt, I'm going to hand it over to you and you can read there.
Yeah, so I'm reading from Matthew chapter 28, starting in the first verse. It says, "Now after the Sabbath, toward the dawn of the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to see the tomb. And behold, there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothing white as snow. and the fear of him, and for the fear of him, the guards trembled and became like dead men. But the angel said to the women, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you seek Jesus, who was crucified. He is not here, for he has risen, as he said. Come and see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell his disciples that he has risen from the dead, and behold, he is going before you to Galilee. There you will see him. See, I have told you." So they departed quickly from the tomb with fear and great joy, and ran to tell his disciples. And behold, Jesus met them and said, "Greetings." And they came up and took hold of his feet and worshipped him. Then Jesus said to them, "Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee, and there they will see me."
Yeah. That is the Easter story. That is why we gather together for Easter. That's why we celebrate it. The risen Savior and King who died on a cross for our sin and rose from the grave to give us new life. And so that's just a beautiful story. Typically, though, Easter means that in some ways for us, culturally and in the church, and in some ways maybe it doesn't, or maybe sometimes we have a hard time connecting those things. And so the first thing that I just kind of want to open up is, what is Easter? Right? I know we just read the story, but what is Easter? Where did it come from? And why do we actually celebrate it? And I think there's two different ways to see it. Like, there's the cultural aspect of what Easter is. So, some people think totally in that aspect of Easter. And then there is a biblical aspect of what Easter is and why we truly celebrate it and why it is actually powerful and special. And so let's take the cultural aspect first. What is Easter culturally? Where does it come from culturally? Why do we celebrate it culturally?
Easter Bunny, man. That's what it's all about. Got to have the eggs, got the Easter Bunny, got to spring's here, everybody's outside. It's like this whole big celebration, right? I mean, and that's even though I grew up in a Christian household, I was about the eggs, all right? I was about finding the prize egg that had a little bit of money in it. I was about, trying to eat as much candy as possible. So culturally, like in my context, like that was, I think in many people's context, it's about the eggs, right? It's about dyeing eggs or, getting a chocolate bunny. I mean, that's just me, or that's that's what I see in culture these days.
Yeah, I think same as for me, growing up. I mean, large family, had a huge egg hunt.
Yeah,
every egg didn't have a dollar value, had a cent value, 5 cent egg, 10 cent egg, 25 cent egg. And then we had what we called the lucky egg, which was an egg wrapped in tin foil that would be hidden, and that was like $5.
Okay,
and and that's where arms got broke, people got punched, brothers and sisters.
Rightfully so.
Yeah. But but all that was part of a larger just family gathering. We all my brothers and sisters would come home on youngest of 8 kids, and so all of them would come home. We'd have a big dinner like a lot of people normally do. And so there was the whole family aspect. We grew up Catholic. We'd go to mass. Typically, especially as our family got older, might be one of the only times our family would be in church together. So I do think the interesting thing about Easter is that even though culturally we have these different things, one thing you can't separate out, even if someone is not a believer, not a Christian, doesn't believe in the gospel, whatever, culturally in the back of their everybody's mind, they know it is a significant religious holiday,
right?
Which I think we can use to our advantage. But once again, family, eating eggs, fun, Easter basket, all good stuff. Chocolate bunny,
well, you see you'll see a chocolate cross right next to a chocolate bunny, right, at the store, and so I think that they're inextricable to think about the Easter season and the resurrection of Christ, and I think that especially during this time we have an opportunity to reiterate that point and to talk about new life, to talk about some things and speak into culture. And so it's an exciting time to celebrate, even though we're in the midst of one of the most unprecedented times in our history. But I think culture is asking the question right now.
Yeah. And that's, at least unprecedented in our lifetime.
Sure.
And this is definitely a different Easter than any of us have ever faced.
Right.
And hopefully never will again. But I agree. I think that Easter culturally, even for me growing up, and I grew up in in a pastor's home. And like from the time I was, the old joke, like I was going to church 9 months before I can't even remember how long you're in the womb, 9 months before I was born, right? And so, and every day, and so it's just like the church doors are open, you're there. And Easter, the Easter bunny and eggs and little baskets and gifts and dressing up and all those different kinds of things are to the Easter holiday, as Santa Claus and presents and reindeer and songs and jingle bells and all that are to Christmas.
Right.
And I think like there's that whole cultural aspect. And I think a lot of times we even kind of say this is the cultural aspect, these are the biblical aspects, but yeah, you guys are right. The biblical aspects are actually the foundation for everything that we do culturally around those holidays. And there are some replacements in there that for Christ and the resurrection that we kind of create with other things. And I know there's the whole idea that the Easter, Christmas, they came out of pagan holidays, but really they were taking over pagan holidays. Right. And they were celebrating something different gods for different reasons and different things. They became believers and they used that holiday time, and it makes sense, right? I mean, Christmas, Easter, you're already gathering, the family's already coming, the turkey's already in the deep fryer, and everybody's already getting off of work and they're gathering together, and now you're a follower of Christ and you want to celebrate the resurrection, and church has done that since the resurrection, and so it's like, okay, well, when are we going to do this? Well, we'll do it at this time. Jesus rose from the grave, most likely in the spring, and so we'll take this holiday over, and some of the traditions from those holidays continued. And some of them still have good meaning, right? And we still can use the egg as like the resurrection, as the tomb, and new life through some of the things that we celebrate at Easter time. But you definitely have these cultural aspects, and then you have these biblical aspects as well. And I think they do overlap in some regards. And again, we're not saying that we just shouldn't participate in any of the cultural aspects at all. Right. But we do want to understand why we're actually celebrating, because I think that's what makes it beautiful. And I think some of the things that we are missing this year at Easter are some of the cultural aspects that maybe don't actually give us joy in the celebration of Easter, and we need to focus on the resurrection. And that's what actually makes those other things enjoyable with our families and the traditions and those different kinds of things. And so, so let's switch. Okay, so culturally, there's a whole lot going on. I know we could talk about that for a long time. Biblically, what is happening? What is Easter, and why do we celebrate it?
Well, I think from a biblical standpoint, I think sometimes as believers we fail to connect these two major events that define what Christianity is. In other words, to fully appreciate Easter is then to pivot all the way back to December and Christmas and the why around that. Right. The fact of the incarnation, the miracle of God coming to man, and so sometimes we're just celebrating that in its own as its own separate holiday, but the two are linked together. And so from a biblical standpoint, with Easter, it really is a great time to capture the whole story, the totality of it. Because when the angel first appears to Mary, he tells Mary, you're gonna give birth to a son, and he will save the people from their sins. Well, when Christ is born, that is the start of that purpose and that mission that is not fulfilled until the cross. And so you have the child that's born in a manger in a stable and all of that, and that is the beginning of the story of a redemption of all that God is doing to bring man back to Himself. So I think to really this year it is a blessing in some ways. I think with the crisis that we're facing and the fact that it does strip away maybe some of the distractions is actually can be a really good thing to give us time to step back and just really immerse ourselves in the fullness of the story and concentrate and focus in on that. It's not that we can't have fun in that, but I do see an opportunity here to where there's a perfect opportunity for families to really immerse themselves in the total story of the gospel together.
Yeah. I think it's a great opportunity to, we're naturally having to miss out on some of the cultural aspects, and we can really, really hone in on the biblical aspects of what Easter actually is, why it's actually life-giving, why it begins to define the lens in which we see everything. And we'll discuss the gospel truth here in this question in just a moment, but I think it 100% does that. And it's not that we at all would ever say we don't want to be able to gather with our families, or, I mean, as pastors, I mean, one of the things you look forward to the most all year is gathering together as a church family at Easter.
Yep.
It is the greatest celebration on planet Earth. It's the biggest party on planet Earth. And so, yeah, we look forward to that. We want to have fun in that environment and see everyone, and we want to participate in I don't know if I want to do family photos, but I do the family photos, and we participate in the egg hunts, and we do big things with the city and in the community and all those kinds of things. We will miss those, right? And we want those things to take place, and family lunches and all of that. But it is an opportunity, Charles, as you're saying, to take the lemon, so to speak, and make lemonade, right?
Yeah.
Like to make the best of it.
Sure.
And maybe God is giving us an opportunity to focus on what Easter actually is about. And I think that will make the celebration greater and more life-giving.
Yeah.
Matt?
Yeah, I mean, I think also it's biblically speaking, this is, you do have to look backwards to Christmas in order to appreciate Easter. I think there's also an aspect in which we are looking forward to the ultimate resurrection that we find in the book of Revelation, when God will raise those who are in Christ to everlasting life, right? So Jesus, he lives, dies, and is resurrected, never to die again. And we likewise, as believers, we will live, we will die, but we will be raised to live forevermore if we are found in Christ. And so Easter, biblically speaking, is this critical crossroads, so to speak, of where we see all that has been and all that will be forevermore coming together.
That's good.
We see the great love of God and the great wrath of God put there in the same place, and that is a part of the ultimate story that goes on forever as God's people are with Him forever. And so, biblically speaking, it really does speak to, yes, the Christmas story, but also the ultimate resurrection story that is still yet to come.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So let's build on that a little bit. Okay. What is the biblical, so if you just had to explain to someone what is the actual reason for Easter, what is the biblical reason, and what does Easter mean for us? All right. How would we answer that question? So really, this is the gospel. What is the essence of Easter?
Yeah, I think that thinking about the Easter story in the grand narrative of Scripture is helpful for us. I think that we understand that God created everything, right? That He is the one who has made us in His image, that He has created all that we see and even the things that we can't see, and that He called His creation good. But man's rebellion has separated Him from God, and therefore there is, we see very early on in Scripture that there is a rescue plan that God has, and it is the sending of His one and only Son. That Jesus would come, that He would live the life that we could not, a perfect life, that He would die the death that we all deserve on the cross, which is part of a huge part of the Easter story, and that He will be raised on the third day just as the Scripture said that He would, and that would be a fulfillment of what God promised in the beginning, and that would ultimately point to the fulfillment that God would save His people from their sin, and that we would live with Him forevermore. And so there's this grand narrative of God's story is being written, and God has made that available to us in Christ, right? Jesus, why did God become a man? Because it was necessary for Jesus to come to represent both God and man on the cross. And so I think that there is a truth, there is an objective truth to the fact that we were separated from God, and now through Christ we can be reunited with him, not only reunited now to have life, but life forevermore. And so when I think about, the gospel implication of Easter, sure, we think it's all about the gospel, but it's this entire story that God is writing, and we have the opportunity to be part of that story, right?
Yeah.
God calls us to himself.
Yeah, and I think the resurrection as just a point of Easter Sunday and what we celebrate, and tying all that in, I mean, the resurrection is what, as you said, gives us new life. It's right. Jesus' work through his life, his death, and his resurrection. And that's how we can actually have salvation. And so Easter, in a sense, actually breaks the chains. Like his resurrection breaks the chains of our sin, like of our shame, of our guilt, of everything that we feel like is holding us back and keeping us from everything that we long to have, right? Like the resurrection, the Easter, it breaks the power of our broken hearts. Amen. And everything that is broken around us and everything that we wish was different and whole as we feel like it should be. It breaks the reality of empty searching. And so everything that I'm searching for in life and trying to find meaning in and purpose in and feeling like I've got to gain or fear losing, it breaks the reality of that. And then not only does it break everything that is holding us from having everything we were created to have, it also seals us in everything that we are created to have. So it seals us in new life. It seals us in the eternity that you're talking about with him. And so because we are created to have relationship and community with God, and he does all of the work for us, and all we have to do is place our faith in him. We're saved by his grace, his work that is sealed by the resurrection. So he rose from the dead, and all that he has done and all that he has promised all throughout the entirety of Scripture is made sure at the resurrection.
That's good.
And now we have a sure hope in who God is and who Christ is. And we understand that everything else in life is all pointing us to him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The cultural aspects of Easter, the biblical aspects of Easter, it's all about Christ.
Because he did what he said he was going to do.
Right.
Yeah, and these things, this is so good. I mean, talking about, Easter, Matt, as you're talking, is a chance to reflect on the fact that God does have a grand narrative. There is a why to all of human history, and in the different things that you talked about, and Brandon, what you mentioned, all of these things are things that I know I grew up with, you guys grew up with, learning in Sunday school for me, in catechism, and then you learn in that, with Easter, the cross and the resurrection becomes the pivotal event in what God is doing, and it's also the pivotal event in human history, whether you believe that the story is actually true or not, because we are here over 2,000 years later talking about it. Right. But as well, then we begin to understand all these the totality of the story in which true for what God is doing in history has to become or is abundantly true on a very personal level. And so,
that's good.
For me, the biblical the biblical meaning with for Easter is the grand story, and I love how you said that. It's this great story, and then the personal aspect of it, which is what God meant, have community with him, is then us finding our place, our part, our role in that story. And the fact of that matter is that God knows us all by name. He has written my name into that story. So at some point in time, once again, I was blessed, fortunate enough, didn't think it was a blessing back then when they actually sent a school bus to come pick me up for catechism on Sunday morning. I was like, man, what does God have against Bugs Bunny? Why can't I get some bunny time, But, so growing up, and then, growing up in a very, once again, growing up in a Catholic background where there were certain routines to the Mass, which I didn't appreciate then. But we always recited the Apostles' Creed, and I could recite that with my eyes closed, but I did not have any context or meaning for that, and so my point being is that whether it's in that context or growing up in Sunday school, there's a measure of the aspect of I'm aware of these truths and I'm aware of this great story. But at some point in time, that story has to become the deeply pivotal event in your own life.
Yeah, that's good.
And so for me, Easter provides a definitive time to where I intentionally lean into God's story in my own life. How when I was 17 years old, I was just sitting around one day, and in one moment's time, I went from God not even being really a factor. It was just a cultural definition. Yeah, God's out there. There is a God, or a religious definition, that, okay, yes, I believe that God is a creator. I believe that there was a guy named Jesus who died on a cross. And then in a moment, something shifted in my life, and the reality of what that means to me began to dawn on me, and it shifted my life, and it became a deeply personal thing. So the glory of Easter is not just the fact that some God that's distant from us has a human history, and we are non-factor, non-player. He's not aware of us. The real miracle is that when Jesus comes out of the grave, Brandon, like you were saying, that becomes not just a pivotal point in human history, but it becomes a deeply personal pivotal point in my own story and history, and what God and how I fit in to what God, the story that God is writing.
Yeah, yeah, it has to be that personal decision that brings you into the family of God, and it's that resurrection of Christ that can actually lead to a resurrection in you.
Yeah.
Right. And that new life, which is required. Just because Jesus did it doesn't mean we are saved in him.
That's right.
But because he did it, we have the ability to be saved by him, by placing our faith in the reality he's done all the work for us. And I think that's one of the beauties of the cross and the resurrection, or the beauty of it. And so with that umbrella of that truth, okay, let's just really quickly, not spend a lot of time here, but I want to kind of just draw out this aspect that there are a lot of things that are different about this Easter, although that truth remains steadfast. And that is actually the reason that we celebrate it. So what are some of the things this Easter, or typically in Easter, that you celebrate as a family traditionally or whatever? Charles, I know you've talked about a few things. And why do you do them, right? And what are maybe some of the things that you'll miss this year?
Yeah.
And then we can kind of practically draw those things out.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we've always in our family have always valued getting together physically, and gathering and celebrating, the resurrection together. Being able to do that physically with a meal and having the ham, doing the whole thing, and being able just to be together, to take pictures. I think about, we don't take a ton of pictures as a family, but you can look over time and see my incredible Easter attire evolving over time, from the time I was a little kid wearing penny loafers, all the way up to where now I wish that I had some penny loafers because they're like stylish apparently. But I think that getting together with family is a huge part of that, and that's not a bad thing. I think that that's a good thing, to be able to get together with family. But this year, with the COVID-19 crisis, that's not going to be possible for us. I'm going to be with my wife and with my kids, which is great, but I'm going to be it's going to be a little more difficult to get together with extended family this year. And so that's one aspect that I think is deeply personal to me, is that just being together with my biological family, extended family, and not being able to do that in the same way this year.
Yeah. That's good, Charles.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same, for me. And of course, our family is at a little bit, different season than your guys. I mean, so when I had little kids, we would go to my, parents' house, or Angie's parents' house, and parents enjoy the grandkids coming in. And we're not there with grandkids, thank goodness. But my kids being older and being adults, they come to us, and we enjoy that. And certainly we'll have our two girls there, but my son lives in Raleigh, and the ability, for him to come, we can't do that. And so there's that aspect of missing, those traditions. Last year, I was really one of the biggest blessings we had was one of my older brothers came and shared Easter, with us. And so I think, a lot of us are going to be missing the same things. It's just that, the gathering of family, the traditions that go along with that. And some of those now just not possible because you can't gather.
I think also there's a community aspect to it, right? We love our city. We love being a part of what our city's already doing. And so there are certain community things that were planned that are no longer going to be. And though we love our city, we desire to still serve our city. Many of the community events that were already planned are just flat canceled. And so that's a point of grieving, for us is not being able to go and to participate with what our city is already doing in the way that our city is celebrating. And so I think that's another part of it as well.
Yeah. And I think, for my family, one of those things is definitely being able to get together with family friends. I think that's huge. I've always done the Easter shopping to get the new outfit and to take the picture, and not since I've been an adult, but we do it now with the kids, right? And so they get their Easter outfit and all that kind of stuff. Sunrise service was a huge thing for me growing up. Our church would always do that, and of course we live in the city where the sunrise service in America began, right? And with the Moravians, and flowers, and you take flowers to your wife or your mom or grandmother or whatever it is. There's all of these, the picture, everything. And I think it's very important for us to realize that while it's very sad that we're not able to do those things this year, I think the important thing is that we don't allow our hearts and minds to think that's the point.
Right.
That's right.
That's good.
Yeah.
And the point of Easter, now, man, Easter's canceled because I can't do this and I can't do that. And those things can hurt. But here's the thing. It's we have to allow the hurt of missing those things to point us to the reality of why those things should be cherished in the first place.
Yep.
And we do all these traditional things, new clothes as this example of new life. That's how that tradition started. The sunrise service as Jesus rising from the dead. And the women who discovered him in the tomb. Flowers because it's spring and it's new life. Everything that we do traditionally, right? Our family and the whole aspect of that points to the reality of what God has given us to make disciples, right?
Yep.
And to love him and to reflect him in all that we do. And so everything we have, I think, we have all these traditions that are supposed to point us to the glory of God. Sometimes throughout the years of our lives, those traditions have become the point, and it's muddied the waters to our actual joy. And I think this year we can say those things are beautiful, and there's some practical things we can do with our family, but we can actually allow missing those things to drive us really deep into the reality of why those things are good.
Yeah, that's good.
And I think we'll appreciate them a lot more when we get out of this whole thing. So let's end our time today by talking about this. Okay, I know Easter's different. We've acknowledged that. Let's help each other through it this year. Okay, this is a question we've gotten a lot about, and I think there are typically 3 different categories that are different for us this year. One is with family. We've talked a lot about that. One is with the church family. We've talked some about that. And then the community aspect, going and doing the egg hunts and everything that the community puts on. All of those things are kind of canceled, but there's still things we can do for our community, right? And so I think it's kind of flipped. Normally at Easter, it's what is the community doing for me? I think this year at Easter, it's what can I do for my community? During this time, we would challenge you guys to think through those things, and we'll talk about one of those opportunities. But what are some things we can practically do with our families to celebrate Easter together this year?
Well, here's a creative thing that actually a tradition that Angie started with our kids when they were smaller. Actually, we did it all the way up until the time that they were in college. And so what an egg hunt, but we would do a basket hunt. And so this is just a fun thing, parents can do with their kids, and it takes a little bit of time. But basically what she would do is it was an egg hunt that led to a basket. So she would take plastic eggs and hide them around the house. And there would be, in each egg, there would be a clue. And she would get creative with it. And that clue somehow related to the biblical story. And sometimes the clues would just be, like little fun things. But in searching for the clues, there would be little reminders about the biblical story in it. And so we had 3 children. We have 3 children. So each child took a turn. They would get the clue, and they would have to figure out what the clue meant, because every clue led to the next egg, and eventually that led to them being able to find their Easter baskets. So it was just a little game, but in that game, she was very intentional. It was a lot of fun for the kids. It was still like an egg hunt, just in the house or in the garage. And then through those clues, they were getting pieces of the gospel story that then led, to the Easter basket. So if you're looking for just like a fun little thing you could do with your kids, that would be one just like practical thing.
Yeah. I can say one thing we're kind of challenging people in our lives to do is to still get up on Easter and get dressed up. Still kind of get the family together. We have the beauty of technology today, and so you can have a Zoom call with all of your family and friends. And the beauty of that is whoever's hosting that Zoom call can actually log on and watch the live service and share your screen. And now you've got all the faces of your family and friends on the side and you're watching the service together. And if you're brave enough, you can actually worship together. You can sing, you can create your own little choir. You can talk about the sermon, the message together, and you can all be right there in a Zoom call watching the service together. I would highly encourage you, and I think we've kind of joked around about it in our family, is having the whole Zoom call and putting the thing on gallery view and taking the photo, the Easter photo, right? And it's COVID-19 Easter 2020, right? And it's just a memory that you can have there. And so you can still take the pictures, you can still hang out, you could still in some way have lunch together. I think you can still create some beautiful memories, even though everything is a lot different, right? Yeah. And you don't want it to be this way ever again. You hope that it's over soon, but you can make the most of it and still appreciate some of those things.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. And I think that, for our kids, I have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and, they understand some of what's going on with regard to the COVID-19 crisis and all that. But I think that it's most important for them to understand all of what's going on with regard to Jesus and Easter and the resurrection. Now, in their own way, obviously. But we are making much of Jesus and understanding and trying to explain to them why we're not going to see grandma and grandpa, you know what I mean? But mostly celebrating. So it's a subtle thing, right? But it's, where's your emphasis? Is your emphasis on what we can't do, or is your emphasis on what we are able to do, which is to worship our Creator God with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength? Yeah. And I think that it can never be taken away, right?
Yeah. And I think it's a good opportunity too, as we've mentioned several times, to actually speak into your family's lives.
Yeah.
Like, if your extended family is really missing the opportunity to gather all together, then, okay, well, why is that such a beautiful opportunity? Yeah. And now you can begin to talk about God and His glory and why He's put us together in families. So I think we could take that opportunity maybe in a deeper way than we ever have. And I think we can take advantage of that. There's a lot of other things, and if you guys have other ideas, you can share those things with us. Let's talk about the church aspect for just a second. Obviously, we're not all gathering together on Sunday morning. That can be a little awkward. Most of us have probably, if you've grown up in church, or even if you haven't, you're just in our culture. Most people go to some sort of service on Easter, right? And you pick up the Bible you left there at Christmas, right? And from Lost and Found. And so it's just kind of what we do. Like, culturally, we still in large ways go to church with our family at Christmas and Easter. And so that's different. And so what are some of the things we can do, just really quickly, in that church family aspect?
Well, I hate to be Captain Obvious, but what you just said there, Brandon, about the opportunity of being able to be in worship together digitally. This is a perfect opportunity to do it. So you're able to do that. And so I've been inviting or sharing on my Facebook page, and a couple of my siblings have been jumping on, to our services here over the last couple of weeks. So this week I can take it to a whole different level, and instead of just sharing it on my Facebook page and if they happen to see it, they jump on, be more intentional about issuing that invite and say, look, it's Easter. We haven't been able to be together in a while. Join me online for the service. If you do that and you combine it with like what you're talking about, doing a family Zoom call, which my nephew up in Washington, D.C. has suggested that we do, find a date for it. Well, there's no better date than this coming Sunday to do that. So let's be online together. Let's worship together. and then jump on that Zoom call together. But I think the intentionality, instead of just, I hope they see that I shared this on my Facebook page, but making it an appointment, to worship together.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think as a church family, we're putting out the daily devotionals that are really centered on the most important week of Jesus's life, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that interacting with those is really important for church folks. I know that a lot of people, now I know because I've talked to you, mm-hmm. that you're we'll miss a couple of days and then we'll try to catch up maybe at the end of the week. I would encourage you to try to tune in every day because it really is ramping up, right? You start with Palm Sunday here, man, what a powerful time we had on Sunday in worship, talking about the cross and just, seeing just the brutality, but also the beauty of what Jesus, he bled and died, right? But then there's this incredible ramping up of our celebration into Easter. And so I think we should follow along as a church family. Do the daily devos, read the word, take some of that and grab a hold of it this week, especially, and through technology, we're able to do that. So I would encourage people to do the daily devotions as a church family as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's really good. And I think it's important to remember that even though a lot of our culture will go to a worship service on Christmas and Easter, mm-hmm. a lot more people will just kind of go online, right, and tune in. And so being intentional to invite people to make the appointments, I think is huge. And I think we're going to see God do something that's bigger than we could ever ask or imagine, right? And we're not going to be like filling every seat in the auditorium like we all like love to see and see everybody and hug everybody and say hi to everybody and celebrate that and go to lunch with all of our family and friends. But I think we can see God do something deep in our hearts, yep. In a deeper way than maybe most Easters do as we focus in on what it's really about. And I think we'll see him do some incredible things in the hearts of those who don't know him but are close to us.
I agree.
And I think, just real quick, and this is just sort of underlining the point, the power of an invite. Mm-hmm. And, studies show that a lot of people would come to church if they were just simply invited. There are people who just want to be invited. Right. And we're talking about come to an actual service. So mm-hmm. how much more is it even easier for someone to participate in a worship service, Brandon, like you're talking about now? They don't have to physically go anywhere, but the power of the invite is still there. Invite somebody to participate, in the online service. And I don't think that can be overstated. And I think a lot of times people think, it's just an invitation. Well, that invitation can change somebody's life. I mean, yep. The power of the invite is how Jesus got 12 disciples.
That's right.
Yeah. So, okay. So community-wise, we already said this is the last thing. And Charles, I'll just ask you to kind of say this really quickly. We're really challenging you guys in the community, as I said before. Normally at Easter, it's like, hey, what's the community doing? How can we kind of take advantage of it? Now in this situation, it's okay, what can we do in the community to help the community and help those around us? And so we challenge you to look at your own neighborhood and everything that's around you and ask, how can I help? We sent out little things for all of our members that they can print out, put on doors to help their neighbors. We're challenging you to think through those things. And we did a whole podcast on it a couple of weeks ago. But one thing that we can all do together, Charles, why don't you go ahead and just tell us quickly about that?
Yeah, so through Redemption Hill is in a relational network called Christ Together, which goes across and cuts across denominational lines. And so several of the pastors early this week were asked that question, how can we bless the community, especially as we are beginning to go into the real crux of the COVID-19 crisis, and they're looking at, beginning to peak with resources and all these things over the coming couple of weeks. And, one of these things that we've always realized, that we realize in this particular crisis is just, how much people who work in the medical profession, whether they're doctors, especially nurses. Read an article in the Wall Street Journal where a doctor was just saying that nurses really have the most patient contact, and that they're really the ones who are most at risk during this time. But, you think of EMTs, anyone working in that, we sort of take it for granted, that they're there to care for us, but even more so now, their own personal health is at risk. And so their jobs actually represent the kind of sacrificial love, the kind of service that that Christ represented by sacrificing himself for us. So the idea is, how can we encourage them? And so what we're doing is we're going to buy a bunch of gift cards, just as a small way to say thank you. So right now we have 9 or 10 churches that are participating on that. There'll probably be a few more. And we're going to buy a bunch of gift cards and take them to different spots to be able to bless medical staff, around the city, just to say thank you. Along with that, there'll be a note that thanks them for their service, and then once again talks about how their sacrifice does embody by example the sacrifice of Christ, and then it'll be signed by all the churches. So that's one small thing. So if somebody wants to come by the church and drop off a gift card, that'd be great. We can include it with what we're doing, and but that also can be done on an individual level. If you know someone, in your neighborhood, maybe get out a card, write a hand note, put a gift card in it, drop it in their mailbox. And so that's one small thing that we're doing this week. And unfortunately, as things continue to unwind, there's going to be need for continual support of our medical professionals. But that's one thing we can do as we lead into Easter.
Yeah. And so if you're interested in doing that, or you have questions about that, you can email us with any questions, info@redemptionhill.net. If you do want to bring a gift card by, $5 to $10 range, and just leave it in the mailbox at the church, then we can make sure that gets to the right spot. And so we want to continue to encourage you guys. We love you so much. Remember, this Easter is not about dressing up. It's not about coming to a church building. It's not about bunnies and eggs. It's not about family photos. Those things actually, if we understand the true meaning of Easter, make Easter boring and unfulfilling in comparison to what Christ has done and what it means for us. And so we challenge you to focus on that this week, and God is going to use it powerfully and mightily in your life. And so we love you guys. We're praying for you. We hope to see you in person soon. God bless.